Committee has said. They say the government's attitude to tackling homelessness, now that includes rough sleeping and people in temporary accommodation, people who are regarded as statutory, so legally defined as homeless, not having a permanent home. They say that the government's attitude to it is unacceptably complacent. And there was an announcement in the budget, wasn't there, of some funding to try to end rough sleeping within 10 years, which is all to the good, but it is rocketed under this government. So they're, in a sense, they talk a lot about fixing other people's mess, don't they? Well, that announcement is very much about fixing their mess. Homelessness in England, a national crisis, says this committee of MPs, found that there were more than 9,000 rough sleepers. That figure surprised me. I thought it was lower. I thought it was a figure that had gone up exponentially, but I didn't expect that figure. 9,000 rough sleepers. Some 78,000 families living in temporary accommodation as well. Jeremy Corbyn, I wondered if he would attack this today, but he didn't. He did last week in PMQs, didn't he? Approached housing and homelessness. And remember, these public accounts committees, these parliamentary committees are cross-party. It's not just one party that does it. The government's response to what it's been told is that it's investing more than $1 billion in the problem. But since 2011, the number of people sleeping on the streets has increased by 134%, according to this report by the Public Accounts Committee. And just one final figure. Again, it's one that Jeremy Corbyn has focused on quite a lot in recent weeks in Parliament. 120,000 children among those without permanent housing. This came up again in PMQs today, but it wasn't Jeremy Corbyn this time. Dr. Rosina Allen-Khan, Labour MP for Tooting, spoke in Prime Minister's Questions just before her party leader.
In 2009, the Prime Minister said it was a tragedy that the number of children falling into the poverty cycle was continuing to rise. Every child deserves to have a roof over their head and food on the table. Yet on her watch, in Wandsworth alone, the number of families forced to survive on food banks is continuing to rise, and 2,500 children, yes, children, will wake up homeless on Christmas Day. So my question is simple. When will this austerity-driven government say enough is enough and put an end to this tragedy?
Prime Minister!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Honourable Lady should note that, in fact, this government has lifted hundreds of thousands of children out of absolute poverty. But I think it's important for all those who have heard her question to be aware of this. She talks of 2,500 children in Wandsworth waking up homeless on Christmas Day. Anybody hearing that will assume that what that means is that 2,500 children will be sleeping on our streets. It does not. It does not mean that. It's important that we are clear about this for all those who hear those questions, because as we all know, families with children who are accepted as homeless will be provided with accommodation. And I would also point out to honourable members opposite that statutory homelessness is lower now than it was for most of the period of the last Labour government.
Well, does that make you feel any better about the 9,000 rough sleepers in England, that there is a distinction between those people who are homeless and the 78,000 families living in temporary accommodation? Clearly, there are two different experiences of homelessness, and we would want to do everything in our power to keep people who are homeless off the streets. But was that, I wonder, an example of the unacceptably complacent attitude that this committee of MPs talked about? Prime Minister's Questions is a very particular beast, but was that Theresa May being complacent? And what do you do about homelessness? Because all of us experience it with our eyes, at least, don't we? We all see it. around us, or most of us, particularly if we live in cities, but not just cities, we will all be seeing homelessness, and it's focused on a lot over Christmas time. We're going to pick it up in the new year as well, and not just drop it because Christmas is over, and we're going to do a series of reports on it then as well. But what do you do about homelessness? Because it seems to me at the conference I mentioned that I was at in Rome a few weeks ago, one of the things I learned from listening to people there was we can't just, as individuals who claim to care, we can't just think there will be some vague authority there, probably the government, that will tackle this. We can't be that vague about our fellow man and woman, can we? Our neighbours in some cases. If they're sleeping rough on your streets, on your high street, they're your neighbours. They're our neighbours. So what do you do about homelessness? Or do you feel helpless in the face of it? What do you want to be done, either by you or anyone else, to tackle this unacceptable national crisis, according to this committee of MPs? 0345 6060 973, the number to call if you've experienced homelessness, helped a homeless person directly. We've had some amazing calls from people who have done that. Then I'd love to hear from you. 84850, the number to text, and you can tweet at LBC. Andrew McClay joins me now. He runs Ealing Soup Kitchen, who used to be homeless himself. Got a bit of a problem with our phone line to him, so we'll get back to Andrew in a moment. But your calls as well, 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Amongst the people I met when I was in Rome were some extraordinary women and men, actually, but two women stand out for me that I met. One is from Philadelphia, one is based in New York. And Mary Scullion in Philadelphia, she saw night after night inner city buildings, so big office buildings, you see them around if you work in a city. She saw that they were lit and heated throughout the night, and around the city at the foot of these buildings were people sleeping in doorways, and she did something about it. She was sufficiently enraged by that sight that she did something about it. If you've done that, if you've done a Mary Scullion and done something about it, I'd love to hear from you. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. We can hear from Andrew now, who runs the Ealing Soup Kitchen. And Andrew, you used to be, great to talk to you again, Andrew. Hi. You used to be homeless yourself as well. So was it your experience of homelessness that made you just think, now I'm safe, I must do something?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think it was, I wasn't on the streets particularly long, but it was the mental toll of homelessness is such a horrendous thing. It really, something that generally stays with you for much, much longer than the homelessness ever will. And so I ended up volunteering for the charity I now work for.
Right.
Just serving soup and chatting to the guests and getting to know them and getting to know their stories, which were, in a sense, similar to mine. That not everybody kind of falls under the same bracket. And I remember, actually, I stayed somewhere that I genuinely thought, after I got a place, I remember staying somewhere and thinking, on one level, this place is so subpar and so below level that it's horrendous that the government would say, oh, it's okay, we've just given them accommodation, like accommodation is going to solve all their problems.
Yeah, well, you raise an interesting point, because we went down to the Marylebone project the other day. We'll hear from one of the women who's been helped by it in about 20 minutes' time, Lara. And one of the things that they said was they're absolutely central to the help they give to the women who go there is that when they help them to be housed, they don't send them to an empty house with an empty life. They send them to a flat from which they can have a proper life, a job, a community, friendships, society. Did you find that lacking when you first got emergency accommodation?
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. I suppose it depends on the area. But I've seen some places that some of my clients have been put into which have roaches, where the beds are stained and broken and the place smells. And particularly, I mean, when you've been on the street for a little while, quite often what happens is there's nothing for you to do. Yeah, I mean, day centers, you've got day centers that you can go to, but most of the time you are going to be bored sitting around sort of figuring out what am I going to do. You're going to have to walk everywhere. You'll feel tired a lot. You won't have any money to do anything. And what ends up happening is, unfortunately, quite a lot of people end up succumbing to things like alcohol. And then alcohol becomes a major part of their life moving forward. So if you get an emergency accommodation and you get put in with the same type of people, it doesn't always help you moving forward to a better life. I mean, that doesn't happen everywhere, but in a lot of cases of some of the people that I met with, we have a lot of repeat business in a way. You know, like we've got a lot of people who can't move on because they're in the same situation. They may be in accommodation, but they're in accommodation with people who are suffering from the same mental strongholds.
So when it becomes bad, it isn't just about a roof. It's about helping somebody to recreate their life.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And Andrew, tell me, you talked about the mental toll. Tell me what that mental toll was to you.
Well, it was kind of like almost like a PTSD. There's like a part of you that feels like you'll never be able to escape it. You'll never be able to leave it. That your self-worth gets destroyed. You start feeling like, what if it happens again? And I can't do that. I can't go back to that place. And thinking I'd rather do such and such than go back to that place. There's a part of you that I think the first night is generally the worst, where there's this, you know, quite often people talk about homelessness, and you know, people can be quite close to homelessness, but that first night of realizing that this is real,
you've got nowhere to go.
Yeah, and you literally have no support, because I mean, 95% of cases, I mean, not every case, but a lot of cases where people are on the streets, it's usually due to a relationship breakdown. So it's not like you can call your family and say, "I'm sorry, can I please come home?" Most of the time, it's usually because of there's some issue that's happened where maybe their partner's cheated, or maybe they've cheated, or maybe there was a problem with money, or there was some sort of issue that it was irreconcilable, and they find that support network is now gone, and they don't have anyone. I think males in some ways are more susceptible to this, because I think women do tend to be better communicators, but men, they do tend to sort of then bottle that up. And the first night that I was out, I thought to myself, like, what if this is it? You know what? I was 24 years old, and I'd literally just moved to the country, and all my family was in Sydney. I didn't have a phone to call them. So I was thinking, like, what if I get stuck here?
What had happened, Andrew? What had happened to you that a young, fit Aussie couldn't do anything about the situation he was in?
I think arrogance, in a way. I think I thought, I came over here sort of thinking that I'd be like every other Australian, like some cheeky chappie that I'd find a job straight away.
But that's why I use the term Aussie as opposed to just man, you know. I mean, we've all got this image of an Aussie guy who comes over and says, yeah, I can sort this, I can get myself some work. And and a lot of people could and can and do. I think I just thought, you know what, I'll come over and it'll be fine. And it wasn't. And I think I just wasn't prepared for that. And the funny thing was, Sheila, this is the weirdest thing. I actually had money. It wasn't like I had my savings, but I couldn't find anywhere. Where I was in Ealing, I couldn't find any hotels and things. And there's part of you that, I know it sounds really strange at the time, and it sounds sort of irrational, but, you know, being on the streets in a way is irrational. And the thoughts that go through your head become quite extreme and quite sort of malnourished. And you start thinking there's never going to be anywhere that accepts you. And then, so I walked for a long time, what felt like hours, and it was probably only 20 minutes, but in my head I was so sort of amped up and thinking, you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to find anywhere. And I had just me and all my belongings. Yeah, it's like the epitome of loneliness, really, isn't it? If you find yourself on the streets and perhaps not working out, not really realising how that could have happened to you. Andrew, I'm going to leave it there if I may, but we'll speak again in the new year. Andrew McClay, who runs Ealing Soup Kitchen. They're on Twitter if you want to take a look at the work they do and maybe support the work they do as well. Used to be homeless himself. Talking there about how that sort of slide into homelessness happened, street homelessness happened to him. And I'll make that distinction a lot throughout the hour.